War had shaped Hale Orion into something beyond ordinary understanding. 300 years of conquest stretched behind him like a trail of broken worlds and surrendered flags. Each victory had added another layer to his legend, another reason for enemies to fear the sight of his crimson battle armor. The Kethvar Empire had given him many titles over the centuries, but the one that mattered most was simple: the Undefeated. His flagship, the Devastator, drifted through the void between star systems, its massive hull scarred by countless battles yet never truly damaged. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as his officers monitored reports from across the galaxy. Each screen displayed another success, another world brought under Imperial rule, another species that had learned to bow before Kethvar might. "Commander, the High Council awaits your report on Sector 12, announced his aide, Voss. The younger officer's voice carried the respect that 3 centuries of perfect victories commanded. Hale studied the tactical display showing their latest conquest. The Trelawney had lasted exactly 6 days before surrendering. Their crystalline cities now flew Imperial banners, their former rulers processing citizenship applications in newly constructed administrative centers. It had been almost disappointingly easy. "Tell the Council that Sector 12 is complete," Hale replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "The Trelawney integration proceeds ahead of schedule. Their mineral resources will strengthen the Empire within the year." But even as he spoke those words, something nagged at him. The Trelawney had been fierce warriors according to their historical records, yet they had folded faster than most. Perhaps it was simply his reputation preceding him, or maybe these outer rim species were genuinely weaker than their inner galaxy cousins. Either way, it left him with an uncomfortable feeling he rarely experienced: boredom. The communication panel chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Admiral Kane's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his expression carrying news of importance. "Commander Orion, we have discovered a new species in the Outer Rim territories. Preliminary scans indicate a developing civilization on a planet designated as Earth. The inhabitants call themselves humans." Hale leaned forward with mild interest. New species always presented opportunities for the Empire, though most followed predictable patterns. They would resist briefly, recognize the futility of their position, and then accept Imperial rule. The process had become so routine that he could predict the timeline within days of initial contact. "What do our scouts report about their military capabilities?" he asked. Kane consulted his notes with the thoroughness that had made him valuable to the Imperial war machine. "Primitive by our standards. They have recently achieved basic spaceflight and maintain several orbital installations. Nuclear weapons comprise their most advanced military technology. Their planet appears to be divided into multiple competing nations, suggesting internal conflict and political instability. A divided species with primitive weapons. Hale had conquered dozens just like them. The pattern was always the same: demonstrate superior force, demand surrender, accept their submission, and begin integration protocols. Simple, efficient, and invariably successful. However, Kane continued, and something in his tone made Hale pay closer attention, there are some unusual aspects to their behavior patterns. "Explain." "Our deep space monitoring stations have been observing their electronic communications for several months. These humans appear to engage in warfare with remarkable frequency, not just between nations but within their own societies. They have maintained almost constant military conflicts for their entire recorded history." Hale felt a spark of interest. Species that fought amongst themselves often produced more interesting challenges when unified against external threats. The Karaki had provided 3 weeks of engaging combat before surrendering, largely because their warrior culture had prepared them for serious resistance. Their entertainment media also presents unusual characteristics, Kane added. Much of their fictional content focuses on scenarios where primitive forces defeat technologically superior opponents. They seem to have a cultural fascination with what they term underdog victories. This gave Hale pause. Most species created entertainment that reflected their values and aspirations. A culture that celebrated defeating superior forces might prove more troublesome than initial assessments suggested. What does intelligence recommend? Standard conquest protocols. Their technology gap makes serious resistance impossible. The analysts estimate complete pacification within 2 weeks of initial contact. 2 weeks seemed optimistic for any species, regardless of technological disparity. Hale had learned over 3 centuries that underestimating opponents, even primitive ones, could lead to unnecessary complications. Better to assume the worst and be pleasantly surprised than to discover unpleasant truths during active combat. Admiral, I want detailed surveillance of human military activities before we proceed. Monitor their response patterns to crisis situations. Study their tactical approaches and command structures. Most importantly, analyze their historical conflicts for any patterns that might indicate unusual resistance capabilities. Kane looked surprised. Such thorough preparation was typically reserved for major campaign targets, not primitive outer rim species. Commander, surely such extensive preparation is unnecessary for a developing civilization. Hale turned his attention back to the tactical displays showing his latest victories. Each one had begun with confident predictions and ended with imperial flags flying over conquered capitals. But each had also taught him something about the nature of warfare and the importance of respecting every opponent. Admiral, 300 years of victory have taught me that the most dangerous enemies are often those who appear weakest. These humans interest me. Their constant warfare suggests either exceptional stupidity or exceptional adaptation to conflict. I prefer to determine which before committing forces. Understood, Commander. I will prioritize intelligence-gathering operations. As Kane's image faded from the screen, Hale found himself genuinely curious about these humans for the first time in decades. Something about their profile suggested they might prove more entertaining than his recent conquests. Not dangerous, certainly, but perhaps challenging enough to provide some satisfaction. He called up the preliminary files on Earth and began reading. The planet showed signs of extensive industrial development despite their primitive technology. Their population numbered in the billions, concentrated in massive urban centers that would make excellent targets for demonstration strikes. Their military forces appeared fragmented and poorly coordinated between different national groups. Everything suggested a standard conquest scenario. Yet something in the data made him uneasy, though he could not identify exactly what. Perhaps it was their apparent obsession with warfare, or maybe the unusual frequency with which their entertainment depicted impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Hale decided to trust his instincts. 3 centuries of undefeated conquest had taught him to pay attention when something felt wrong, even if he could not explain why. These humans would receive his full attention and careful preparation. After all, what harm could come from being too thorough? The intelligence reports had been thorough, detailed, and completely wrong about everything that mattered. Hale discovered this truth as he watched Earth's response to his perfectly executed first contact protocol unfold. In ways that defied 3 centuries of experience, his fleet hung in perfect formation above the planet's major population centers. 50 warships arranged in the classic intimidation pattern that had convinced dozens of species to surrender without firing a shot. The demonstration had been textbook perfect, a precisely targeted strike against an isolated military installation, followed immediately by broadcast demands for unconditional surrender. What happened next violated every assumption about primitive species behavior. Commander, we are receiving responses to our surrender demand, reported Communications Officer Nash, her voice carrying confusion rather than the usual satisfaction of another easy victory. Display the primary response, Hale ordered, expecting to see planetary leaders requesting negotiation terms or attempting to buy time with diplomatic delays. Instead, his main screen filled with the image of a middle-aged human male in military uniform. The man's expression showed no fear, no desperation, no recognition of the hopeless situation his species faced. Instead, he looked directly into the camera with something that took Hale a moment to recognize: anger. To the alien forces currently threatening Earth, the human began, his voice steady and controlled. This is General Morrison of the United Earth Defense Command. We have received your demands for surrender and our response is simple. Go to hell. Hale blinked. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to superior force with such direct defiance. The human continued speaking, apparently unfinished with his rejection of reality. You have attacked our world without provocation and murdered our people without warning. You have made the mistake of assuming we would submit to your threats. You are wrong. Earth will resist your invasion with every weapon at our disposal and every life in our ranks. We will make you pay for every meter of ground you claim. This is not a negotiation. This is a declaration of war. The transmission ended, leaving Hale staring at a blank screen while trying to process what he had just witnessed. His officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly as confused as their commander by this unprecedented response. "Sir, we are detecting massive communication activity across the planet," Nash reported. "It appears to be coordinated military mobilization on a global scale." This made no sense. Earth's intelligence profile had indicated a fractured species divided into competing nations with lengthy histories of mutual conflict. Unifying such a fragmented civilization should have been impossible, especially in response to external threats that rendered all their internal disputes irrelevant. "Show me the mobilization patterns," Hale commanded, the tactical display filled with rapidly updating information that challenged everything he thought he understood about human nature. Across every continent, military forces were moving with coordinated precision. Nations that had been enemies for generations were sharing resources and command structures. Weapons manufacturing facilities were retooling for maximum output. Civilian populations were implementing evacuation procedures with efficiency that suggested extensive preparation. "Commander, this is impossible," whispered his tactical officer, Lieutenant Reese. "Our intelligence indicated these humans had been fighting each other for centuries. How are they coordinating this level of unified response?" Hale had been wondering the same thing. Species integration typically required generations of careful imperial management. Humans had accomplished it in hours while facing extinction-level threats. "Perhaps their survival instincts override their political divisions," he suggested, though this explanation felt inadequate. Most species responded to hopeless situations with despair and surrender, not with increased organization and defiance. The communication panel activated again, this time showing multiple human faces from different locations around the planet. Each wore military uniforms from different nations, yet they spoke with unified purpose. "This is Admiral Chen of the Pacific Defense Fleet, General Volkov of the Eastern Command, Air, Marshal Singh of the Continental Air Forces, Field, Marshal Roberts of the Western Armies." They spoke in sequence, their message clearly coordinated despite representing historically hostile nations. "We are implementing Operation Last Stand," they announced together. "All Earth forces are now under unified command. Every human military asset has been directed toward a single objective: your destruction." The transmission shifted to display footage from across the planet. Missile silos opening in synchronized sequence, naval fleets assuming attack formations, air forces launching in massive coordinated strikes, ground armies moving into defensive positions with textbook precision. But most disturbing of all were the civilian populations. Instead of panicking or fleeing, they were organizing. Factories converted to weapons production. Scientists shared research across former enemy nations. Even children were participating in supply logistics and communication networks. "This is not normal behavior for a primitive species," Hale admitted to his staff. "Most civilizations fragment under external pressure. These humans are becoming more unified." The first wave of human attacks arrived exactly 37 minutes after their declaration of war. Primitive nuclear missiles that should have been intercepted easily by Imperial defensive systems. Yet somehow impossibly, several penetrated the outer perimeter and detonated against ship hulls. The damage was negligible by Imperial standards, barely scratching the armor of his lightest vessels. But the psychological impact was significant. In 300 years of conquest, no primitive species had managed to damage his fleet during initial contact. "How did their missiles penetrate our defenses?" Hale demanded. His defensive systems officer, Commander Vale, studied the sensor readings with obvious confusion. "Sir, they modified their warheads with some kind of adaptive targeting system. The missiles learned from our defensive patterns and adjusted their approach, vectors in real time. Adaptive technology suggested sophisticated engineering capabilities far beyond what their intelligence had indicated. Humans had not only unified impossible quickly, they had also improved their weapons technology between the declaration of war and their first attack." "Commander, we are receiving another transmission," Nash announced. This time the screen showed a single human female in civilian clothing, standing in what appeared to be a scientific laboratory. Her expression combined intellectual curiosity with murderous determination in ways that made Hale uncomfortable. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, she began. I am the director of the Human Reverse Engineering Project. 37 minutes ago, we declared war on your species. In that time, we have analyzed the wreckage from your demonstration attack, reverse engineered your basic defensive algorithms, and implemented countermeasures across our entire military arsenal. She paused to let this information sink in before continuing. You have made several critical errors in your assessment of humanity. First, you assumed our divisions made us weak. Instead, our constant warfare has made us experts at rapid adaptation and technological integration. Second, you believed our primitive technology made us helpless. Instead, our limitations have taught us to maximize efficiency and find unconventional solutions. Dr. Mitchell stepped closer to the camera, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. But your greatest mistake was attacking us without understanding what you were facing. We are not just another species to be conquered. We are the species that turned warfare into an art form, survival into a science, and adaptation into our greatest strength. You have not invaded a primitive world. You have provoked a civilization that has spent its entire existence preparing for this exact scenario. The transmission ended, leaving Hale alone with the growing realization that his standard conquest protocols might be inadequate for this particular species. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Hale Orion began to doubt the certainty of victory. 6 months into what should have been a routine conquest, Hale found himself facing a situation that had no precedent in Imperial military history. His forces controlled exactly 0% of Earth's surface, had lost 12 ships to increasingly sophisticated human attacks, and were dealing with an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. The latest tactical briefing painted a picture that would have been laughable if it were not so genuinely threatening. Human forces had not only reverse-engineered, captured Imperial technology, but had somehow improved upon designs that represented centuries of HFY engineering advancement. Their latest missile systems are 40% more efficient than our own, reported Chief Engineer Kai, his voice carrying disbelief that mirrored everyone else's feelings. They have reduced the power requirements, increased the targeting accuracy, and somehow made them capable of independent tactical thinking. Independent tactical thinking. Hale had seen weapons that could adapt to changing battlefield conditions, but these human modifications went beyond adaptation. Their missiles were learning, developing new attack patterns in real time, sharing information with other weapon systems, and coordinating strikes with strategic intelligence that rivaled trained military officers. How is this possible? Hale asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be as unsettling as everything else about this campaign. Sir, we captured several human engineers last week, reported Intelligence Officer Ford. According to their statements, they have been working continuously since the invasion began. No sleep cycles, no rest periods, no breaks for anything except absolute necessities. They have essentially converted their entire scientific community into a single focused research project, defeating us. The dedication was impressive, but it failed to explain the technological leaps humans were making. Reverse engineering captured technology typically required years of careful study, not months of frantic experimentation. There is more, Commander, Ford continued with obvious reluctance. The captured engineers described their methodology. They are not just studying our technology, they are testing it against volunteers from their own species. This caught Hale's attention in ways that made him deeply uncomfortable. Explain. Human volunteers are subjecting themselves to Imperial weapons testing. They want to understand exactly how our systems affect their biology, their technology, their tactics. They are literally using themselves as test subjects to develop countermeasures. The implications of this information settled over the bridge like a toxic cloud. Species that willingly sacrifice their own people for tactical advantage represented a level of commitment that Hale had never encountered. Most civilizations valued individual survival above strategic objectives. Humans appeared to operate according to completely different principles. Sir, we have lost contact with Patrol Group 7, announced Communications Officer Nash, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. Patrol Group 7 consisted of 3 heavy cruisers conducting routine orbital reconnaissance. Losing contact with such a formation required either massive technical failure or coordinated enemy action far beyond human capabilities. Display their last known position. Hale ordered. The tactical screen showed the patrol, Group's final transmission location near Earth's largest moon. Sensor readings indicated significant debris fields and energy signatures consistent with weapons fire. But the weapons signatures were wrong. They showed Imperial energy patterns but modified in ways that suggested human involvement. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from Earth," Nash reported. The main screen activated to show a human male in military uniform standing in what appeared to be the bridge of a starship. Behind him, Hale could see equipment that looked disturbingly familiar. "Commander Orion," the human began, his voice carrying satisfaction that made Hale's blood run cold. "My name is Captain Davis of the Earth Defense Force. I am currently aboard the Imperial cruiser Vengeance, which your forces designated as the flagship of Patrol Group 7. The implications hit Hale like physical blows. Humans had not just destroyed the patrol group. They had captured Imperial vessels and were apparently operating them successfully. "You are probably wondering how primitive humans managed to defeat your advanced technology," Captain Davis continued. "The answer is simple. We learned from you. Every weapon you used against us taught us how to build better weapons. Every tactic you employed showed us how to develop superior tactics. Every ship you sent gave us new technology to study and improve." The human gestured to the equipment behind him with obvious pride. "This ship now carries weapon systems that combine Imperial technology with human improvements. Our engineers have increased power output by 60%, reduced energy consumption by 40%, and added tactical capabilities that your original designs never possessed." Hale felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of warfare: genuine fear. Not fear of death, which was always present in combat, but fear of defeat. Fear of losing to opponents who were supposed to be inferior in every meaningful way. "But we have learned something else from you, Commander Orion," Davis said, his expression becoming more serious. "We have learned that you are not invincible. Your tactics follow predictable patterns. Your technology has exploitable weaknesses. Your forces can be defeated by opponents who understand how to use your own strengths against you." The transmission shifted to show footage that made Hale's officers gasp in horror. Human forces were attacking Imperial positions using modified Imperial weapons. Captured Cathvar equipment had been redesigned and improved to target specific vulnerabilities in Imperial defenses. Humans were not just fighting with their own primitive weapons anymore. They were fighting with superior versions of Imperial technology. "We want you to understand something very important," Davis concluded. "Every day you remain in our system, we become more dangerous. Every attack you launch teaches us how to defend better and counterattack more effectively. Every piece of technology you deploy becomes another weapon in our arsenal." The human leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that carried across the bridge with chilling clarity. "You came here expecting to conquer primitives. Instead, you have created an enemy that learns from every mistake, adapts to every challenge, and improves with every defeat. We are no longer the species you thought you were invading. We have become something else, something designed specifically to defeat you." The transmission ended, leaving Hale staring at blank screens while contemplating the impossible situation his forces now faced. Humans had accomplished in 6 months what most species required decades to achieve. They had not just adapted to Imperial technology, they had surpassed it. "Commander, what are your orders?" asked Tactical Officer Reese, his voice carrying uncertainty that reflected the mood of the entire bridge crew. Hale studied the tactical displays, showing the current state of the campaign. Human forces now controlled superior technology, demonstrated tactical flexibility that exceeded Imperial training standards, and showed no signs of the war weariness that typically ended prolonged conflicts. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Hale Orion was forced to consider the possibility that victory might not be inevitable, but retreat was not an option. The Empire had never withdrawn from conquest campaigns. His reputation was built on absolute success. 300 years of undefeated warfare would not end with surrender to primitives who should have been conquered months ago. "Continue the campaign," he ordered, though his voice lacked the confidence that had carried him through centuries of victory. "But revise all tactical assumptions. We are no longer fighting the species we invaded. We are fighting something they have become." As his officers acknowledged the orders and returned to their duties, Hale remained focused on the tactical displays. Somewhere in the data patterns and strategic analyses, there had to be a solution. There had to be a way to defeat an enemy that grew stronger with every engagement. There had to be, because the alternative was unthinkable. The captured human databases contained more information than Hale had expected from any primitive species. As he delved deeper into human history and culture, a disturbing picture emerged of opponents who had been preparing for this exact conflict their entire evolutionary existence. Late in his private quarters, Hale studied thousands of years of human warfare with the analytical mind that had made him the Empire's greatest military commander. What he discovered challenged every assumption about primitive species and forced him to reconsider fundamental beliefs about conquest and resistance. Display human military, conflicts from the past century, he commanded. His personal terminal. The data that appeared made him pause. Humans had fought 2 global wars involving virtually their entire species, dozens of regional conflicts that would have devastated most civilizations, and countless smaller engagements that demonstrated tactical innovation under extreme pressure. But the scope of the conflicts was less disturbing than their intensity and the speed with which humans adapted to new threats. During their first global war, humans had begun with cavalry charges and primitive aircraft. By the end, they were using poison gas, advanced artillery, and coordinated combined arms tactics that rivaled imperial military doctrine. The second global conflict had seen even more dramatic technological advancement, culminating in weapons capable of destroying entire cities. "Show me their tactical evolution patterns," Hale requested. The analysis revealed something that made his blood run cold. Humans did not just adapt to new threats. They actively sought them out. Every major conflict had driven technological advancement at rates that should have been impossible. They treated warfare not as a necessary evil, but as a catalyst for improvement. Their literature provided even more disturbing insights. Human stories glorified impossible victories against overwhelming odds. They created fictional scenarios where primitive forces defeated advanced enemies through cleverness, determination, and willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. These were not cautionary tales about the costs of war. They were instruction manuals for defeating superior opponents. "Display their educational systems," he ordered. Human children learned warfare as naturally as they learned language. Their games simulated combat scenarios. Their toys were miniature weapons. Their entertainment centered around conflict resolution through violence. Every human was essentially trained from birth to be a potential soldier, capable of contributing to military efforts in both obvious and subtle ways. But most disturbing of all were their biological responses to extreme stress. Unlike most species, which became less effective under pressure, humans actually improved. Their bodies produced chemicals that enhanced performance during combat. Their minds became more focused and creative when facing life-threatening situations. Evolution had designed them to thrive in exactly the conditions that imperial conquest protocols created. Computer. Analyze human responses to extinction-level threats throughout their history. The results made Hale question whether conquest was even theoretically possible. Humans had faced ice ages, volcanic disasters, plague outbreaks, and natural catastrophes that would have ended most civilizations. In every case, they had not just survived but emerged stronger and more technologically advanced. They treated extinction-level threats as challenges to overcome, rather than disasters to endure. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Admiral Kane's image appeared on his personal screen, his expression carrying news that Hale already suspected would be unpleasant. "Commander, we have completed psychological profiles on captured human prisoners. The results are unprecedented in Imperial conquest history. Proceed with your report, Admiral." Kane consulted his notes with obvious discomfort. "Sir, these humans do not break under interrogation. Standard psychological pressure techniques not only fail to extract information, but actually seem to strengthen their resistance. They use capture as an opportunity to study our procedures and gather intelligence on our capabilities." This confirmed what Hale had begun to suspect. Humans were not just individually resistant to Imperial conquest methods. They were systematically immune to them. "Have we gained any useful intelligence from prisoner interrogations?" "None, Commander. However, we have lost significant intelligence to them. Several prisoners have escaped, taking detailed knowledge of our ship layouts, security protocols, and operational procedures. We believe they are sharing this information with human military command." Hale closed his eyes and tried to process the implications. His forces were losing intelligence faster than they could gather it. Every contact with humans resulted in net information flow toward Earth rather than the Empire. There is more, sir. Kane continued with reluctance that suggested worse news was coming. Our behavioral analysts have reached some disturbing conclusions about human motivation. Explain. These humans are not fighting for territory or resources or political control. They are fighting for the survival of their entire species. This creates motivation levels that exceed anything in Imperial experience. They view death in battle not as failure, but as contribution to ultimate victory. The psychological profile painted a picture of enemies who could not be discouraged, intimidated, or convinced to surrender. Humans appeared to operate according to principles that made compromise impossible and victory absolute. Sir, there is one final item in the report, Kane said, his voice dropping to levels that suggested classified information. Our xenobiologists have analyzed human evolutionary patterns. Their conclusions are classified at the highest levels. But you need to understand what we are facing. Hale leaned forward, sensing that critical information was about to be revealed. Humans evolved on a planet with unusually high levels of environmental pressure. Predators, climate changes, natural disasters, and resource competition created selection pressures that favored traits we are now encountering in combat. They are literally evolved for warfare at levels that exceed any known species. The full scope of his situation became clear with horrible precision. The Empire was not fighting a primitive species that could be conquered through standard protocols. They were fighting a species that had been shaped by evolution specifically to resist conquest by any means necessary. Admiral, what do your analysts recommend? Kane hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable with his next words. Sir, the recommendation is immediate withdrawal from Earth space. These humans represent a threat level that exceeds our operational parameters. Continued engagement will result in unacceptable losses and potential compromise of Imperial security. Withdrawal. The word struck Hale like a physical blow. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had never withdrawn from any engagement. His reputation was built on absolute victory against impossible odds. The idea of retreat was not just personally unacceptable, it was inconceivable. Thank you for the report, Admiral. I will consider all recommendations. As Kane's image faded, Hale found himself alone with the most difficult decision of his military career. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans were not just dangerous opponents. They were opponents specifically designed by evolution to defeat enemies exactly like the Kethvar Empire. But retreat would mean admitting defeat to primitives who should have surrendered months ago. It would mean acknowledging that the Empire's greatest military commander had been beaten by species that had barely achieved spaceflight. Hale studied the tactical displays one more time, searching for any advantage he might have overlooked. The data was clear, consistent, and pointed toward only one logical conclusion. For the first time in 300 years, Commander Hale Orion began to seriously consider the possibility that some enemies were too dangerous to fight. The turning point came without warning, as decisive moments often do in warfare. One day, Hale commanded the most powerful invasion fleet in Imperial history, and the next day he found himself desperately trying to keep that fleet from complete annihilation at the hands of primitives who had somehow become the most dangerous opponents he had ever faced. The transformation began with reports that initially seemed too impossible to believe. Human ships, crude constructions that looked more like industrial accidents than military vessels, were hunting Imperial forces across the solar system with devastating effectiveness. These vessels possessed none of the elegant design principles that characterized advanced spacecraft, yet they were systematically destroying warships that had conquered dozens of star systems. Commander, the destroyer Swift has gone silent, reported Communications Officer Nash, her voice carrying the strain of delivering increasingly bad news. That makes 7 ships lost in the past 12 hours. 7 ships. Hale had lost more vessels in half a day than in some entire conquest campaigns. The mathematics of attrition were becoming undeniably clear. At current loss rates, his fleet would be combat ineffective within weeks. Display the attack patterns, he ordered, hoping tactical analysis might reveal some exploitable weakness in human strategy. The holographic display showed the systematic destruction of Imperial forces across multiple engagement zones. Human ships operated in coordinated groups that demonstrated tactical sophistication far beyond their apparent technological capabilities. They struck with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of Imperial ship designs, targeted critical systems with surgical accuracy, and withdrew before Imperial forces could mount effective counterattacks. But the tactical excellence was not the most disturbing aspect of human warfare. It was their apparent psychological approach to combat that made Hale's experienced officers exchange nervous glances. "Sir, we are receiving another transmission from human forces," Nash announced. The main screen activated to show multiple human faces, each wearing expressions of cold satisfaction that made Hale deeply uncomfortable. These were not the desperate defenders he had expected to face. These were predators who had found prey. "Commander Orion," said the lead figure, a woman whose voice carried authority earned through recent victory. "I am Admiral Thompson of the Human Space Force. We wanted to thank you for the educational opportunities you have provided." Educational opportunities. Hale felt his stomach tighten as he realized what she meant. "Your invasion has taught us valuable lessons about advanced warfare. Your technology has shown us new possibilities for weapons development. Your tactics have demonstrated techniques we never would have discovered on our own. Most importantly, your presence has unified our species in ways that thousands of years of evolution could not accomplish." The transmission shifted to show footage from across the solar system. Human shipyards working at impossible speeds to construct vessels using hybrid Imperial-human technology. Weapons testing facilities where captured Imperial equipment was being improved and modified for human use. Most disturbing of all, training centers where humans practiced combat techniques using captured Imperial simulators. "We have learned something important about ourselves through this conflict," Admiral Thompson continued. "We are very good at warfare. Better than we ever imagined. Better than you anticipated. Better than your empire believes possible." The transmission focused on her face, and Hale saw something in her expression that he had never encountered in 3 centuries of conquest. Genuine enjoyment of combat. Not the grim determination of species fighting for survival, but the satisfaction of predators who had discovered their true nature. "You made the mistake of teaching us how to fight advanced enemies. Now we are going to teach you what humans do to threats against our species." The screen filled with tactical displays showing human forces moving beyond defensive operations. Ships were leaving Earth's orbital space, heading toward the outer system where Imperial supply lines operated. The hunters had become the hunted, and humans were demonstrating that they understood pursuit warfare better than species with millennia of spacefaring experience. "Commander, we have lost contact with Supply Depot 12, reported Tactical Officer Reese, his voice barely controlled. "Long-range sensors show human ships in the area. Supply Depot 12 was located in the outer asteroid belt, far from Earth, and supposedly beyond human operational range. If humans could strike targets that distant, nowhere in the solar system was safe for Imperial forces. Sir, incoming priority transmission from the depot's final automated message," Nash announced. The display showed the interior of Supply Depot 12 during its final moments. Human boarding teams moved through the corridors with professional efficiency, securing critical areas and downloading data with speed that indicated extensive preparation. But it was their behavior toward captured Imperial personnel that made Hale realize how completely the tactical situation had changed. The humans were not killing their prisoners. They were interrogating them with techniques that appeared to be producing useful information. Worse, they were broadcasting the interrogations on frequencies specifically chosen to demoralize other Imperial units. "This is interesting," said a human interrogator whose voice carried scientific curiosity rather than military necessity. "Your supply network follows predictable patterns that make interdiction very easy. Your communications protocols have obvious vulnerabilities that we can exploit. Your tactical doctrine relies on assumptions about enemy capabilities that are no longer valid." The human looked directly into the camera with expression that combined intellectual analysis with predatory satisfaction. "Tell your commanders that we are coming for all of them. Every supply depot, every communication relay, every ship operating in our system. We are going to systematically destroy your ability to threaten Earth, and we are going to enjoy doing it." The transmission ended, leaving Hale confronting the reality that his forces were no longer conducting a conquest campaign. They were fighting for survival against enemies who had learned to use Imperial methods better than the Empire itself. "Commander, we are detecting massive energy signatures near Earth," announced Sensor Officer Cole, his voice carrying disbelief that mirrored everyone's feelings. "The humans appear to be launching something very large." The main display showed Earth's orbital space filled with activity that defied all estimates of human technological capabilities. Massive structures were moving away from the planet, powered by drive systems that combined Imperial technology with human improvements. These were not defensive installations. They were assault platforms designed for operations far from Earth. "They are building an invasion fleet," Hale whispered, finally understanding the full scope of what humans intended. The communication panel activated again, showing Admiral Thompson one final time. "Commander Orion, we want you to deliver a message to your empire," she said, her voice carrying finality that made Hale's blood run cold. "Tell them that Earth is no longer a target for conquest. We are now a threat to anyone who considers conquering us." The transmission shifted to show the massive human fleet preparing to leave Earth's orbital space. "We learned from the best teacher possible, an enemy who tried to destroy us. Now we are going to visit your worlds and show them what we learned. We are going to demonstrate that humans do not just survive attempts to conquer us, we eliminate the threats that make such attempts." As the transmission ended, Hale found himself facing the most complete reversal of fortune in Imperial military history. He had come to conquer primitives and instead had created an enemy capable of threatening the Empire itself. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Hale Orion realized that victory was not just unlikely, it was impossible. The final confrontation came not as a dramatic battle, but as a simple choice between annihilation and acknowledgement of failure. Hale faced this choice while watching the tactical displays that showed human forces systematically dismantling 3 centuries of Imperial military doctrine with ruthless efficiency that exceeded anything in his experience. The situation had deteriorated beyond all reasonable parameters. Human ships now operated freely throughout the solar system, interdicting supply lines, destroying communication relays, and hunting Imperial vessels with predatory determination that made retreat impossible and victory unthinkable. But the tactical situation was not the worst aspect of his current predicament. The worst aspect was the reports arriving from Imperial space itself. "Commander, priority transmission from Admiral Kane at Imperial Command," announced Communications Officer Nash, her voice carrying defeat that reflected the mood of the entire bridge crew. Kane's image appeared on the main screen, his expression showing stress levels that Hale had never seen from the normally composed officer. Behind him, emergency lighting indicated crisis conditions at the highest levels of Imperial Command. "Commander Orion, the situation has changed dramatically. Human forces have appeared in Imperial space. They are attacking civilian targets with weapons technology that appears to be based on our own designs but significantly improved." The words hit Hale like physical blows. Humans had not just defeated his invasion fleet, they had somehow acquired the capability to threaten the Empire itself. "How is this possible?" Hale asked, though he suspected the answer would be as disturbing as everything else about this campaign. "Sir, intelligence believes they reverse-engineered captured Imperial navigation systems and developed faster-than-light travel capabilities. Their ships are crude but effective. More importantly, they appear to understand our strategic vulnerabilities better than we do." Kane paused to consult data that obviously carried bad news. "They are targeting industrial centers, communication hubs, and military installations with precision that suggest detailed knowledge of Imperial infrastructure. But Commander, they are not attempting conquest. They are implementing systematic destruction of our ability to threaten Earth." Systematic destruction. Hale realized that humans had learned the most important lesson possible from Imperial warfare. The best defense against superior enemies was making those enemies incapable of sustained offensive operations. "What are the casualty reports?" "Significant, sir. Human weapons appear to be specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Imperial ship design and defensive systems. They are achieving destruction ratios that exceed theoretical maximums for their apparent technology levels." The implications settled over the bridge like toxic atmosphere. Humans had not just adapted Imperial technology. They had perfected it beyond Imperial capabilities and were now using those improvements to destroy the very forces that had taught them. "Admiral, what does Imperial Command recommend?" Kane's expression showed reluctance that suggested he was about to deliver orders that violated fundamental Imperial principles. "Sir, you are ordered to immediately withdraw all forces from Earth space and implement Protocol 7. Total system interdiction. Earth is to be classified as a forbidden zone. No Imperial forces are to approach the system under any circumstances. Protocol 7 was reserved for threats that exceeded Imperial ability to contain or control. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, it had been implemented exactly twice, both times against ancient civilizations with technology that posed existential threats to the Empire itself. Admiral, humans are a primitive species that achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. Surely Protocol 7 is excessive. Kane's expression became grim in ways that made Hale understand how completely the situation had changed. Commander, these humans are no longer primitive. Our xenobiologists estimate they have advanced their technology base by approximately 500 years in less than 12 months. At current rates of development, they will possess superior technology within a decade. 500 years of advancement in 12 months. The mathematics of technological progression painted a picture of opponents who were not just dangerous but were becoming exponentially more dangerous with each passing day. But sir, there is more disturbing news. Kane continued with obvious reluctance. Human forces have transmitted a message specifically for you. The main screen shifted to show a familiar face. Admiral Thompson, the human commander who had coordinated the destruction of his fleet. But her expression now carried something beyond tactical satisfaction. It showed the cold certainty of complete victory. Commander Orion, she began, her voice carrying finality that made Hale's blood run cold. By the time you receive this message, human forces will have destroyed 17 Imperial installations and eliminated 43 ships in your home territory. This is not random destruction. This is a demonstration. The transmission shifted to show footage of Imperial facilities burning under human attack. Advanced installations that had stood for centuries were being systematically destroyed by weapons that combined Imperial technology with human improvements. We want your Empire to understand something very important, Thompson continued. Earth is not just defended. Earth is now actively dangerous to anyone who threatens us. We have learned everything you taught us about warfare and conquest. Now we are teaching those lessons to anyone who considers making the same mistakes you made. The human leaned closer to the camera with expression that combined scientific interest with predatory satisfaction. Your species made the error of believing that technological superiority guaranteed victory. You assumed that primitive opponents could not become serious threats. You were wrong about everything that mattered. We are not the species you invaded 1 year ago. We have become something else. Something designed specifically to eliminate threats like your empire. The transmission ended, leaving Hale alone with the weight of absolute failure. 3 centuries of undefeated conquest had ended not with glorious battle but with the recognition that some enemies were too dangerous to fight. Sir, what are your orders? Asked Tactical Officer Reese, his voice carrying hope that his commander might still find some solution to their impossible situation. Hale studied the tactical displays one final time, searching for any possibility he might have overlooked. The data was clear, consistent, and pointed toward only one possible conclusion. Signal all Imperial forces to withdraw from Earth space immediately, he ordered, his voice carrying defeat that no one on the bridge had ever heard from their legendary commander. Implement navigation restrictions preventing any Imperial vessel from approaching the Sol system. As his officers acknowledged the withdrawal orders, Hale opened a personal communication channel to Imperial Command. His final report would be brief, accurate, and completely contrary to everything the Empire believed about conquest and primitive species. Imperial Command. This is Commander Orion submitting final report on the Earth campaign. Recommendation. Classify Sol system as permanently forbidden. Mark human species as too dangerous for engagement under any circumstances. These opponents do not just resist conquest. They eliminate anyone who attempts it. Hale paused, considering how to summarize the most complete military failure in Imperial history. Further recommendation. Study human development patterns for defensive applications. They have demonstrated capabilities that exceed current Imperial understanding of technological advancement and adaptive warfare. Most importantly, they have proven that some species become more dangerous when threatened rather than weaker. As the transmission ended and his fleet began the humiliating withdrawal from Earth space, Hale allowed himself one final look at the planet that had ended his legendary career. Somewhere on that blue world, humans were continuing the technological development that had made them too dangerous to fight. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Hale Orion understood that the greatest victories sometimes came from recognizing when not to fight. Some enemies were not meant to be conquered. They were meant to be left alone.